Well, welcome everyone to the ARA Town Hall meeting. The first, we hope, in a series of many more than one, although we have another one on Friday, much like this one, to talk about the 2021 annual meeting, to talk about the larger context in which this sits in terms of some of the ways that we very much want to transform and recreate and collaborate on the development of our meetings and convenings. We certainly have all learned a lot about being in different forms of meetings, holding meetings, conducting meetings through various modalities. And this is an opportunity based on where we are today to talk about and share some of our plans for 2021, some of our thinking that would reshape how we begin to think about 2022, which we hope that the pernicious pandemic that we've been living in will permit a place-based meeting in San Diego in 2022. But this is really an opportunity to reach out to our community, to hear from you, and from you to hear in really the most preliminary ways. And I don't mean to say that those preliminary ways are underdeveloped as much as porous and flexible as we begin to solidify our processes. As you know, for many of you, we hope many of you who submitted papers or were parts of symposia, the peer review process is about to begin. That process will lead to program committees making important, significant decisions about papers and about sessions. And during that same time, our own developmental thinking and consultation will continue in a way that we hope collectively what ARA delivers is the kind of meeting that we can that will exceed and excel beyond even our expectations today, based on where we have been, what we've learned, and how we intend to experiment with various forms of convenings even before the annual meeting in 2021. It was certainly not our first choice to think that that we could not be place-based on April 9 to 12 this year. But as we looked at the science, as we looked at what we already knew, we felt that when we looked at the resources that were shrinking in every place and space of employment in terms of support for travel, even if the health consequences of COVID potentially abated. As we looked at the science, as we were informed by other experts in the field, we thought the best decision was to be virtual for 2021. And we needed now to turn our attention to that in a way that would serve our research community, our members and our non-member attendees well. So in this event, we want to talk a little bit about what we mean by that. We want to talk a little bit about the unfolding and planning for the 2021 virtual meeting, as we call it, a work in progress. And Robert, can you show the agenda on the screen, or maybe you have? Also, and this is what I would consider to be a loose coupled agenda. If we all came to a dinner party in one place and we had an open discussion, we would not overly structure that discussion. So we are hearing the welcoming and the introductions of and our overarching goals. I want to just introduce our colleagues briefly. You see that on the screen, we have our ASL interpreter with us. If you should also wish to see the closed captioning, it is a little up screen hashtag at the bottom of the screen. If you have not used that in Zoom yet, please do so. This session is being recorded. That will be true of the Friday session as well. And those who cannot fit these sessions live in their schedule will have an opportunity to review them, both with the ASL interpreter as well as the closed captioning, of course, being embedded in this. So just if I can for a moment, I want you to know who on the crew is here. We don't know all of you who are here, although we did have a sense of perhaps around 400 of our those who are part of the education research community and the AERA community are with us today. And we are grateful and thankful. We know how precious your time is, how many things are going on in everyone's lives, and that you're giving of yourselves to not just hear about where the annual meeting is going and our planning and where AERA is going and planning with that, but also to contribute is really a gift, and we don't take lightly that that is something that you're doing with and for us. So if I can introduce my colleagues, who many of whom will not be visually on the screen once we begin. Tony Pauls, who's our Director of Communications. Hi, Tony. Is going to be handling the Q&A, and we're going to spend a lot of time on Q&A. And that's a real good way of asking or framing remarks or questions that you want to be sure that we turn to. We can assure you we don't necessarily have all the answers, but we'll try to tell you where we are as frankly and as candidly as we can, and also benefit from those questions so that we can be more precise in future communications and conversations and fact sheets that will follow. Nathan Bell, our Director of Communications and Special Projects, and I chided him in saying that this was one of those special projects. He's going to be handling the chat. And so the chat is totally open. I can see we've got 26 or so persons that have added the chats. He'll try to synthesize in this open forum discussion the dominant themes or issues that are coming up in the chat. Of course, those are less structured questions than in the Q&A. So if you've got a structured question, please stick it in the Q&A, even while you might chat and respond to others. And of course, whatever is comfortable for you is comfortable for us. So I would love at this moment actually to pause and say, gee, I wish we could have an open conversation. And in this virtual space, we are turning to the chat and the Q&A functions to guide us. I also want to say we apologize for being a few minutes late. We were wanting to be sure the technology was working smoothly between and among us. And of course, we too, like most of you, AERA staff since March 16th, I believe, or 15th, we have been working from our home locations, and we work at meshing what we're doing in such a way that you will at least sense, to the extent you can, that we're a one environment, as we were when we did the town hall meetings in March, before we recognized how pernicious COVID-19 is and the need to move into isolation and in a non-interactive environment. So we're all separate, but together as one staff. I think one of the things I really wanted to highlight as rock bed for us in many ways as an association, transcending meetings, although much of our interaction occurs in meetings, irrespective of whether it is submitting a paper to a journal and receiving a welcoming, helpful, and constructive review, whether it is going to a professional development workshop or one of our webinars or our fall research conference for early career scholars, or whether it is writing and asking for information and feeling that you have been heard and listened to by your colleagues and receive a timely and respectful response. AERA is committed as an association in terms of all of our value premises, in terms of the fundamental commitments that are inherent in the principles in our code of ethics, that we are committed to an inclusive environment for all. And that is a collective effort. We all can learn and benefit from each other when one is at a meeting, whether virtual or place-based. That is equally as important, whether you are in a session or in a reception where there is a higher level of attentiveness to those issues endemically because of the topic, perhaps one of the sessions of the Social Justice Action Committee of their 10, as when you walk into a session and the extra wide hallways, of course, will be virtual this year. So I want to give that as an example, that those extra wide pathways that we have created to make it easy for everyone isn't filled with people sitting in the aisles, and that we need to call attention to that, and we need to collectively own that with all of our leadership. And as positive as we think we are as a climate and culture, AERA is about culture and climate change. We can always do better. We can reflect constructively on where we've been. And the annual meeting and meetings are points in which that issue gets heightened attention, but it is not the only ways in which we work together. We operate in ways that are respectful of each other and appreciate the diversities that we bring and the abilities that we bring to the association. And then from doing so, it's a very strongly shared belief, without sounding any more preachy than I intended, that we will be stronger and better. Our research will be more robust and more significant when it hears and benefits from all of those voices, whether it's multiple modalities and methodologies, whether it's different theoretical or empirical frames, or if it is a deeper and more constructive appreciation of who we are as professionals. And we've worked at that. We introduced an Ombuds program at the 2019 meeting, and the Ombuds program will indeed be part of the virtual meeting. And we are giving very serious thought to what that means in terms of many forms of convenings, not just the places where it may be expected, where closed captioning may be expected, or ASL may be expected, or a third party that you could turn to for advice and help. It's definitely a priority in our ethics committee and in our, what we warmly call AMPP, annual meeting policy and procedures around meetings and convenings. And I want to underscore that it is a very core and long-term commitment of our leadership and our staff. And we want to strive to be as iconic as we can, recognizing that even what we think is strong and good is always better together. And as we look ahead, we want to hear your voices and get your input and benefit from that. So it's not just words on the agenda. It's a deep commitment that we want to make real, and in some fields of science and scholarship, because it's the subject matter of what we do, we need to be sure we're not complacent in a shared expectation. Well, we write about this, we talk about this, and therefore we live this in our daily lives. And we need to not only do that, as in the theme that Sean Harper, our president, has adopted for this year, accepting educational responsibility. And what that is as researchers is not just about the outside worlds in which we contribute, but it's also how we co-create the inside world in which, I don't mean an insider world, but the world of AERA in which we live and which we can be exemplars in other places and spaces, we hope for others. So I wanted to sort of frame that, because the virtual meeting certainly has issues we want to think through. We've been doing lots of things. We want to do lots more things, and we want to do them in a way that serves our community attendees and not just presenters well. But it's part of the larger mosaic, the larger commitment in which we sit. Some of you may be aware that ARA in 2020 adopted a policy for honors, awards, and fellow status with respect to what guides us in the granting of honors. All of our awards committees receive that, and that guides us in conferring awards. It can guide us in suspending or revoking awards. And I hope that those of you who submitted papers to the annual meeting took seriously that checkoff that has been present for years, and that is, my research is in accord with the standards of the ethics code. And then there's a checkoff, my conduct is in accord with the standards of those ethics codes. And while prescriptions do not change culture, that's the collaboration that we hope to emulate in the virtual meeting and in all of the ways that we work together respectfully and appreciatively of what we each can contribute to the field of education research. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about, and Robert and I will kind of give you a little bit of an overview of the planning for the 2021 virtual meeting. Some of those issues were in I suppose I've written all over this, but in the bullets that you received in the letter inviting you to join with us. And we have learned a lot in thinking through how the 2020 annual meeting was to be virtual, and the decision to cancel the virtual meeting after the decision to cancel the place-based meeting in San Francisco was not out of a concern that we could not hold a virtual meeting, was more out of a concern that our members, our attendees, our presenters, our participants needed to do their work during that period of April 17th to 21st, 21, I believe, and that was engaging in the shifting nature of their own responsibilities, parent care, child care, self-care, and that holding a meeting at that time it became obvious that it was going to be too much and led us to cancel the meeting. But we learned a lot in thinking about what our meeting can be, and that has informed how we're doing this very meeting. How we have delivered 9 courses with very high attendance and interactive possibilities, including things like faculty members saying at the end of the meeting and attendees knowing, well, the course is over, but I'm going to put my laptop aside, meet me in 10 minutes, and we'll have an informal conversation, some of which have gone on for well more than an hour of those course attendees. So we are as much concerned about the substance and the socio-emotional, if I can put that, experience, and the welcoming, as I've addressed before, part of our environment. Submissions are in. Submission deadline has closed. We have session submissions and paper submissions. Our aim and ambition is to have a platform that is user-friendly, where sessions of all of the genres that those submitting session submissions can be accommodated through, I will say, a Zoom likely or Zoom-like, but typically we have found the Zoom modality most successful and most widely used, and we have multiple channels and capacity through Zoom, and the platform that we will select and develop that will allow us both to do Zoom sessions. We want to do more than Zoom sessions for sessions. Those will, as we had planned before, be available, I will say immediately. Well, whether that means 24 or 36 or 3 hours is part of both the number of sessions and how we deliver them. But unlike some virtual meetings, the meeting will be available for all registrants to the meeting for a very long time span. We hope that many of you, if you haven't done so yet, and we're presenting in 2020, will take benefit of the interactive presentation gallery. The interactive presentation gallery is designed for papers, roundtables, and posters for the presentations. The way that it will be delivered for those who participate in 2020, for the papers that you might have hoped to give place-based, for 2021, these will be presentations that you will be creating not on a PowerPoint slide that sometimes are very difficult to see and read, depending upon the amount of information packed into it, and we intend to even improve our guidance there and make that much more visible so that when presentations are made, they will be made in a way that the audience can engage with them. So one of the features of papers that will be presented in virtual space is that they will use our interactive presentation gallery to create their visuals. Those visuals can include voice narration because it is a web-based product. It can include showing pictures in addition to words. Each slide can include narration. We ask authors to give an overview narration of their presentation, as you might do if somebody came up to your poster or you were in a paper session. Authors and multiple authors can chat. Multiple authors or the lead author can set up a time for a Zoom session. So with posters, it would be with that author. For roundtables, it would be for the group of authors, even though the presentations would be available in a roundtable motif. The reason why I'm emphasizing this is that it is a much more dynamic and accessible way of sharing content. We are currently, and would do so next year, taking the oral narration for the presentation, and we are transcribing it so that every viewer can either read it in as large a print as they wish, or hear it, or both. And where it's part of our work for 2020 that will extrapolate for 2021 and many of our convenings and activities in between, so that we can share content. That content can be seen in advance, and it will be a more of a web-based product that has much more accessibility and functionality, so that if someone posts something in color in the website, but it can be more visually read in contrast of black, white, or white, black, that will be an option for the viewer seeing a web-based interactive presentation poster than was ever the case for handouts or for PowerPoint slides. And so some of our learning and what we're actually doing in 2020 will translate into very concrete plans for 2021. So when you get our next emails that say, if you were planning a presentation for 2021, you can still do this. And I don't want to hype this, but I do want to say, It is a wonderful way before your next paper and before your next session to interact with the research community worldwide by creating an interactive presentation that offers you this functionality. Hey, Sean, thank you. President is now on the screen. That offers you this functionality now, and will definitely be part of the functionality that we are offering. The meeting, as you know, or maybe as we know, more embedded in our minds, is scheduled for April 9th through 12th. It was intended to be our first 4-day rather than 5-day meeting. And we did that so that our members would be well served, knowing that the first day was a half day and the last day was virtually a half day. And it is costly and time consuming to go to a place-based meeting. So we will in all probability use that 4-day modality for sessions and for papers, and then use something that we might call the evening span, let's say 5:30 to 7:30 or 8 for business meetings and social activities that AERA will host and support for divisions and Cigs, and work at the human dynamics of those, including the provision of services so that all can attend and feel welcome as they do, we hope, in our informal, I'd say the co-curricula, as we do for the more formal curricula. The professional development courses are most likely to be the 4 days after the annual meeting. We would be most likely to schedule them as the mini 4-hour courses, as we are now doing with our series of 9. And the schedule we have been using, and I'm just going to anticipate that my dear colleague and Director of Professional Development, George Wimberly, I think he is not doing a course right now, so I have no doubt he is with us, and we'll step back from the 9, but this 9 has resulted in a great deal of engagement, high attendance, so we have an experiments running from sessions with 200 to 800, and have worked on how to make them user-friendly. But the scheduling of them is important, because if we schedule them, let's say East Coast from 9 to 12, that doesn't work as well worldwide, even though you can see it later as a post-production product. And so we're more likely to use a afternoon span as we have for the 9 courses. I would say that one of the things that you should expect, and we want very much to do, is meet up opportunities, so that in the registration, for example, you might include not only, as you did for your submissions, keywords for your paper, but maybe keywords where you'd like to connect with other scholars with similar sets of interest, so that we can do some crowdsourcing and set up essentially more spontaneous meet-up groups that might be more in the range of 24, 24, or maybe 36. But if we hit one that fills up, because there's great interest in connecting with colleagues who are at a similar career stage, maybe looking for a similar type of job, maybe working on one problem in informal education or another in STEM education, where you just want to hang out in the ways that either derive from a session or just from the social networking that we aim to create. So they will be additional opportunities for informal gatherings that we will plan, that will be driven by our member interests, and that will have a real strong opportunity for spontaneity. Some of the ways that will take form will be an interaction and communication with our divisions and our Cigs, some of whom have some of that planning and are executing some of that planning this year on their own as part of their around the clock, much more of a sense of year-long planning. And from those very experiences, that will help us, and from these very experiences of a town hall conversation, we'll have an opportunity to offer an informal part of the meeting. We also expect our exhibitors, however we deliver it, we expect exhibits to be present, for exhibitors to have opportunities for scheduled times with early career scholars, potential authors. Our journals will offer as many journal talks as before, if not more, where our journal editors, when I say our, I mean journal editors in the field, will have our table talk sessions where we have had symposia that break out into conversation groups. We'll be able to do that and have people sign up for groups. It could be that something like the roundtables, that instead of an hour and a half roundtable session, we might have 2 at 40 minutes where you pick your round tables, because when you're in a room, you could leave one table and go to another. And here we need to sort of manage your interactions across tables. You can stay at one for 2 sessions, but we want to be able to ensure that people have choices because they want to interact in that modality. So that's a more part of the formal program, but equally the case that's a sensitivity to how we want to appreciate how people appreciate and want the annual meeting to be, so that the virtual meeting meets those expectations, but that we offer things in virtual space that exceed the expectations we brought to a place-based annual meeting. And I think the interactive presentations versus the handout and PowerPoints is a very good illustration of that, which allows for a much more dynamic and accessible presentation, but also allows for gatherings post that roundtable and post that poster session to convene with a group or to convene with authors or multiple authors. So I'm just going to ask Robert, I know I might have hit some of the things that you would have. Are there points that you want to additionally drive home, and then we can open it up for questions? I did see Sean, who I know will participate with us in many ways in the Q&A. And Sean, are you most comfortable with that? And we'll let it go, and then maybe some closing remarks from all of us.
Yeah, of course. And let me just say thank you to all of our members and colleagues for being with us.
Felisa, I have the gallery available if you'd like to preview that or not. It's up to you. But certainly we can.
Well, let's hold that, and let's say that what we are going to do, because we also want to encourage those who have papers for the 2020 meeting to view not, oh, I'm going to present old hat and get my paper in this gallery, but really as a way of creating community with your ongoing work, even though your new work will be accepted, and we hope, and presented at the annual meeting. For those wondering about things like acceptance rates, I will say that we anticipate that that it'll be the same kinds of allocation. We are not going to be more draconian. A virtual space opens up space, and consonant with quality reviews, we want those who have strong reviews and strong acceptances to have space to share their work. And so if one unit has a higher submission than another, typically that affects the allocation, but we're going to ask every program committee to pay a lot of attention to ensuring that that consonant with the reviewing standards we have for peer-reviewed submission papers and sessions, that participation opportunities remain in place. What I was going to say about the interactive poster is we're going to actually post several hundred of our presenters have already done the posters, and we're going to just offer on our website illustrations of how to do that. Another invitation will go out. We want to encourage you to do that, not because it's good practice for 2021, although it will be, but it's a great way of engaging with the community right now with the work you had done, and every author drives that. You don't have to schedule a Zoom. You don't have to schedule a live chat. You could use just the Q&A function. And from an accessibility point of view, we will be, every part of a iPoster will be available in transcription, as well as the verbal presentations will be, hearable, and it's pictorial in different ways. So maybe it's sort of, I know we started a bit late, but it's 40 minutes into this. I'm hoping that both Tony and Nathan, what are you hearing? What's being asked? How can we help? We do want to hear from everyone, and or almost everyone. We will sift through the questions and make sure that every question has an answer, even if the answer is we need to think more about that or we don't know yet.
So I can provide a few questions that we've received on the Q&A. The first notes that this particular session right now is an important resource for those to use with students seeking to understand the role of a professional organization and how to participate in a process such as this. So the question is how will AERA follow up to examine how this and the related town hall session will be studied to help people new to the organization, as well as leaders, to understand how and what this and related sessions are used to support its members and others.
If I'm hearing you right, or fully, there was a little bit of static there, Tony, that well, I think that our intent with all of these feedback sessions, this one being recorded, so we have more of an opportunity to really study these in detail in the town hall meetings, and similarly even with our feedback from our courses. One of the things that I most value about AERA is not only are we a research society that studies education, but we are therefore want to emulate the best practices of being a learning community. So what we hear here could very well extrapolate, for example, to webinars leading up to the annual meeting. So for example, in the not just in how to prepare a presentation, but also one of the things that we've said about the interactive presentation mode is that, so for those of you who want to do it in this way, that the presentations can be in multiple languages as long as half of it is in English. Well, outside of the United States, many of our members have a lesser included sense that they don't know I'll say the key to the course that is more, let's say, endemic to institutions, faculty and students who are working in the United States. And while we are not the World Education Research Association, we seek to have participation worldwide. We have attendees worldwide, and we have members worldwide. So one of the kinds of extrapolations that would come out of prior, so I can use that as an illustration, not knowing exactly what would come out of this session, is that from prior sessions, it has very much signaled the insight on our parts, on the part of our International Relations Committee, that we should offer preparatory sessions for the next round of submissions or presentations, and how to ensure that people really understand, not just by reading a set of messages. So I could well imagine more user-friendly fact sheets. I could well imagine more webinars rolling out to the meeting. And I suppose one of the ways we're rethinking or thinking about what it means to have an ombuds present at events, I could well imagine us having a town hall meeting around what our expectations are for interaction in the non-formal sessions that we are trying to also cultivate. So that, I think you were raising the issue, Tony, of earlier career persons, so that the early career persons that may feel virtually that the networking possibilities are less accessible than maybe when their mentor or advisor introduces them at a reception. How do we, whether that's a concern or not, but let's say it was one, how do we structure meetups so that, let's say, 3 or 4 of our fellows might be available to the things we called fireside chats that the Graduate Student Council plans, might be something that we would have as meetups to connect with persons with whom you share substantive research interests. And those are, I suppose, not knowing what the chat or the Q&A will yield, I think that we expect and want to use this input very instrumentally.
Okay. Yes, and this particular person had suggested that AERA possibly consider a task force with Division D to study this issue. I think we can follow up on this after this event.
Yes.
Okay. So
we do value Division D, though, and the
yes,
potential volunteerism.
So there's another question about how AERA plans to handle the different time zones of presenters and attendees.
Yeah. I think our best thinking, even though we haven't put a number on it, is not to tag to Eastern, or if we do, we start later in the day, so that we are, we don't start at 8, but start later and run longer. And I think that was embedded in my comment about these business meetings and the receptions. I suppose one of the other dimensions of the time zone is that the interactive presentations can be viewed at any time, to the extent that they spin off Zoom sessions or a session or sessions that will seek to be at least attentive to the maximum time zone, as when we plan a meeting, what covers the most space of those who both are attending and those who have had acceptances. Robert, you've been, I know, giving a lot of thought to that time span issue, time zone issue.
So in our first sets of models, we've modeled it starting later in the day on the East Coast, and to help the folks on the West Coast and also those in Europe, and going a little bit later for those in Asia. So we have a couple of models we're working through right now, and we hope to have something finalized very soon.
Essentially, acceptances, I can't remember if they go out October 31 or November 1, and then we start scheduling. So by November, everything is going to be scheduled in some way. It's a little bit more, well, it's not any more complicated, but we'll have 4 full days as opposed to these 2 half days. Right. We will open with an opening plenary. I know that Sean's Sean and I've had some conversations. He's already given it a good deal of thought, there will be a very welcoming virtual party that will precede the opening plenary, which will be day 0. And so that we start with full days by having certain events on other days, most in particular the courses, that will, I think, at least open up, that will at least be also graduate student and early career maximally friendly, because the courses won't compete with sessions they might otherwise wish to attend, or these informal networking groups. One of the things that I want to mention that Sean and I have been talking about that we did for a number of years, and it was introduced in 2009, and it was an idea that came from then President Lorraine McDonald, and continued through, I think, at least Chris Gutierrez, and that is to create opportunities on particular topics. I think we had about 6 each year, but where there would be a group leader, and where typically they've been on aspects of the presidential theme. There's a group leader where people kind of convened in advance on day 1 of the annual meeting in the place-based mode, and the leader selected perhaps a reading or 2 in advance, or they were co-leaders of some. And these groups became kind of a bit of epistemic communities or informal networking groups. Some actually continued to meet after the meeting. They might go to 3 sessions in common and then reconvene and have some discussion opportunities. And I think they were maxed out at about 25 or 30, but we can always, I mean, obviously not everyone could be in a group, but they were definitely first come, first serve. There was no privileging of anyone to participate, and something like that is another way we can structure informal networking. And while my conversation with Sean has not yet evolved to say, well, this is a for sure, he had heard about this through some of our prior presidents. I described it, and I thought it was really exciting. I had the opportunity to invent it in 2009 with Lorraine, and as I said, some groups have continued well beyond those 3 or 4 years as communities of scholars reading each other's work and other things. What are you seeing there, Nathan, in your aggregation of chats?
It's actually been relatively quiet. There is one question, which is, when will we be posting the recording of this town hall, and how will we be telling people how to access that recording?
So I think it's pretty quick, meaning within a day. We don't edit these in any sense. Robert, do you know, Badud is Badud, can you speak from hosting and let us know exactly what we can expect?
Yes, the recording will include some part of the practice session. So we have to do a little edit. Once it is done, then we will post on our website.
Okay.
So it might take a couple of days maximum.
So we'd say this is Tuesday, probably by Friday, and then Fridays by the following Tuesday or Wednesday. We won't hold up on this one for that one.
That is right.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
So I have another question, Felice. It says, it's from Christy Bergen. It says, a group of us, about 25, had planned to meet to discuss directions of our field and plan collaborations at the 2020 meeting. It was not part of the program, but AERA had offered us a meeting space to use. Will we have an opportunity for such meetings that are not part of the program in the virtual meeting? How might that work?
We always love doing sprinkling of that. I don't really recall if that request came to me. If it did, I would have spontaneously said yes. And that would work. That that would work in this motif of offering informal opportunities that people would almost on the spot sign up for. I would say I'd say on the one hand, one thing that we've sought to encourage persons to gather together who aren't typically in contact gathering together themselves. So I'm going to assume this was one of those. So you can see, even with a session submission, we say to those submitting and to reviewers, you know, if you're presenting a session that's just a bunch of collaborators that always get together, that's, you know, you don't really need the ARA space, at least unless you've got some commentators that will bring a fresh perspective. But assuming, and I am assuming, that you were seeking to bring persons together who have not, you know, been ongoing collaboration. If it was ongoing collaborations of collaborators, often they'll schedule their own space. But we do want to facilitate, we actually have a mode for even submission, but even without a formal submission, we do want to facilitate, and always have wanted to facilitate, what place-based meetings really do provide so well, and that is an occasion for face-to-face interaction and exchange. And we're going to do that. We're thinking that through in every way. Some of you may have heard that ARA is developing a hub platform, and it's a hub platform to connect to different forms of data on education and learning and STEM. But the hub platform is really to create also opportunities for scholars from very different areas didn't even know they had similar interests. And that's why I said something like the registration. If we can add some interest, we might be able to use some AI searches and say, hey, you guys have similar interests. Maybe you want to talk. Maybe you want to get together, or somebody can do searches. So the fact that you had this plan for 2020 is certainly in the wheelhouse of what we want to do in this informal exchange for the annual meeting, and are leaning very heavily on ourselves to be able to provide that, actually even more than in the annual meeting. We're not trying to duplicate what Cigs do so extraordinarily well and what divisions and sections do extraordinarily well, but we do want, with important issues and topics where researchers want to convene and think in new ways together, we want to provide that space. And I think these informal meet-up structures will offer that. They won't be, and they will be, I suppose, private meetings of sorts. Does that help? Say yes to Nathan if it does, or reframe it if it doesn't.
I'll ask one more question, then I'll turn it back to Tony. We have a question about whether SIGs and divisions will be able to hold pre-conference sessions for 2021.
The answer is yes. The pre-conference sessions, meaning the mentoring sessions and the other sessions that divisions and SIGs hold. There's been sometimes a little bit of, a little bit of a migration to having a pre-conference before a conference. And as a broader issue of policy having nothing to do with virtual space, or 2022 space, we hope in San Diego, or 2023, I think is Chicago. In creating a shorter meeting, it was really out of a strong interest in keeping the community together. So we want to do that in a way that meets the needs of divisions and SIGs for their, what is typically capacity building kind of pre-day events. It could be that a division might choose to do it differently than a pre-day event, out of a concern, or SIG, out of a concern that having it as a pre-day event might be too much in virtual space when you're not leaving your home space. Like when I meet in Washington, I am always feeling much more fragmented than when I either attend or as executive director execute a meeting. There's always that, oh, I go back to the office for X and then I see Y and Z and somebody calls and I think I have to return a call. So we know that people will be in their home bases, may not even yet be in their home institutions, may indeed be home. And so our units need to be thinking about how much of the conventional pre-programming works. We're going to be having some deep conversations with that. So for example, Division K this year, because we did not have the virtual annual meeting or the place-based annual meeting, the vice president and her executive officers, her executive council or board, have planned, I think, 2 or 3 of that are similar to the pre-day mentoring sessions. So there may be other motifs that units would like us to be thinking about, but those who want to have them at the same temporal time, those would be pre, and we'll be doing the courses post, so that they won't trade off against the possibility of, let's say, an early career scholar or a graduate student wanting to go to something a division or a Cig is offering and also would be interested in courses, which in fact actually had begun conflicting. So we had a pre-conference that we'll have to think through whether to do virtually or not, that AERA and the Spencer Foundation collaborated on in 2019. That was kind of preempted by events in 2020, but was focused on scholars with diverse abilities and disabilities whose scholarly interests range the spectrum of topics in education and learning across the spectrum of educational contexts and years. And it was a really successful conference. AERA and the Spencer Foundation are committed to doing it with our colleagues again, who were involved in the planning of it. And we'll have to think through whether there's a virtual modality of that will work, whether that might work freestanding, or whether we enlarge it for 2022. But we'll work with the community around and the units around their best preferences. And we'll contact those, of course, that have had them traditionally or were on the schedule to have them in 2020 to see what makes the most sense.
Felice,
Yes.
someone has noted that a lot of institutions are not providing funding for conferences this year. The argument being that there are no travel costs associated with virtual conferences.
Mm-hmm.
So she asked, has AERA discussed the registration fee for the conference and specifically for graduate students?
Yeah, we've been giving a lot of thought to it, trying to model against what things might cost, because everything we're doing will have a cost. One of our concerns with the core reason, the dual reason really, for canceling so far in advance was, one, in our best judgment, this pandemic would still be at issue. And we did not want people to travel, to convene together, and that it was not really functional to convene in a way that would be meaningful. The second reason that one can't say exceeds in importance life-threatening situations, but definitely important to all of us. Sean and I started talking about this very early on, is that we saw that institutions across the board were cutting back on funding, not just travel, but funding for meetings, travel, and anything that would have to do with a meeting, and that there were going to be, real financial challenges. We are very much, as you hopefully saw with what we did in 2020, we charged, we gave back all the registration fees. For the courses, we've reduce them to $35 from courses that were $95 and $85 and $115. So this will be, our rates will be for members extremely affordable. We don't have a number yet, where we got to get kind of a bare bones expense number. As I've said in a number of emails, when the annual meeting canceled, membership renewal that is usually quite robust in the second half of March and April also canceled. I don't mean members canceled, but they didn't join. Now, they didn't join for, I forgot to renew a couple of places myself. You know, everybody's got so much on their minds. Every time you turn around, you get off this call, you probably have 30 emails that you didn't expect. Some are the tight pocketbooks or apprehension about resources. Some just not thinking about it. The sense of community around the cancellation, all of our decisions seem to have been very highly supported and appreciated. So it's not that we have any sense that people are seeking to depart, and not that people join any organization for the annual meeting discounts, but there's a, you know, there's a relationship between the two. You know, you just forget you didn't register and therefore you didn't join. You know, those things kind of go together. As I said, it happened to me twice, just in this same span with all of you. So the rates will be quite affordable in the graduated scale of last year. We don't have a number yet, but I suppose it would be, you know, for the early bird, it certainly would be a reduction of a substantial invisible amount. And for the non-members, it will not be a substantial reduction, because we have experienced that that we need to ensure that our members get a real benefit from joining, and that as much as non-members are extraordinarily important in our field, and we do not use membership as a test of fellowship programs, articles, you know, the annual, we don't, some societies you have to be a member to even submit. ARA does not have that as a requirement, but we want our members at all levels, and definitely graduate students and early career, to join. For those of you who got your degrees in 2020, we have to think about this for 19 as well, but we have a special, we've had in place for the last 2 years, a special dues reduction, and we'll continue to try to do that dues reduction. And if we can, we'll try to see if we can extend that for those renewing their memberships from 19 as well as 20. And so we'll try to see what we can do on the membership side as well. The rates for graduate students, for members, as well as for retirees is remains quite low on the membership side. So I think you can expect to see a rate that's material and substantial, even though I can't put a percent on it yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it were, you know, $80, $90 less than, you know, than regular members may be paying early bird. It'll be visible and material, as low as we can make it, given that we have costs involved in everything that we're doing, and that we have a staff that has shrunk over the years, but we can't over this year, and we're not. But we need to, you know, be sure that we have the support to viably deliver what we wish.
Okay, there's a SIG related question. Our SIG has planned a few interactive sessions, one an interactive poster session, another an interactive brainstorming session. How will these be possible?
So that's in the, I'm assuming, in the planned program of a SIG, as opposed to the submissions that came in. And those will be your planned sessions, well, the first one sounds, repeat the first one again, Tony?
Interactive poster session.
Yeah, what we'll probably need to do with that is treat that as a symposia type. It's a session that you're planning. It's not posters that were submitted, not papers that became posters. We would plan that as a session type. We ideally, not more than ideally, like the paper submissions that need to be the final submission, that we would want that interactive poster created in advance so that it's available. And we would either create that in breakout rooms where people could rotate, you know, randomly. We can rotate them in breakout rooms, attendees. We could have them in a common room space like this, depending upon how many you have. We could have up to 24, and attendees, I suppose, could roam and view. But I think one of the session technologies will fit the sessions, even for the session that we've done. I don't remember how many years now. Is it the 18th or the 19th year? Hank Frierson's session, which is essentially roundtables of Black scholars on different topics relating to those individuals' careers or specialties. We're going to see that as Hank doing his general introduction and what he says about the session, and, you know, kind of welcoming the community together. And then there will be opportunity for people to have elected going to 3 or 4 tables, and they will be go to that table, and each of those tables, which is like a poster that I'm being asked about, each of those tables will be in a breakout modality, and then we can come together. Where we're in the final review stage of a very large mega volume on teachers of color. And the session we had planned for that was going to be a 2-part session with roundtables, because it has quite a number of authors. And when we thought of that virtual, it would have been the same way. You know, you pick the chapters where you want to talk with the authors, and I think that'll work well. And the second one, Tony, was?
Interactive brainstorming session.
Yeah, interactive brainstorming session. If you have, let's say, I suppose what I would suggest, and when we work that through for those session types, is that that we announce a sign up, and that people sign up who are interested in attending, just like they're going to put it in their schedule. Once we see what's in the schedule, then we can determine whether that can be done in a, you know, what modality meets that interaction, or we may have to say, have part A, part B, you know, 2 interactive ones. If you're a large SIG and it became very popular, we'd be faced with the same challenge if even place-based. There's only so many people who can interact in a room. So we might, you know, if it were, again, like the roundtables, if it were a 90-minute session, we might say, well, you guys as leaders, do you want to divide it into 2 40-minute interactive sessions? Once we are very much hoping that the functionality that we've had with the app of being able to develop a schedule, that individuals will be able to create a schedule of what they wish to do at the meeting. It won't be a fixed schedule, but and that some things that would have signups, like the other ones I've described, would be. So this would be one of your session submissions, or one of your uses of your session allocation, and if you, I suppose, we would want to encourage you to post a description of what this interactive conversation will be about, what might be, you know, the core research objectives, so that those signing up you know, have a sense of what they should bring to the table. Maybe it's an abstract of work they're working on, what they should bring to the table, and what the nature of the interaction might be. That's really doable.
Okay. There's a question about whether the plan is to use the program portal like we have in the past, but replace the room number with how to connect virtually.
I'm sure the answer is yes, that we're not going to have room numbers, that there is going to be a schedule that's searchable by unit, by day, by time, and by interests. And now Robert's going to put more skin on those bones. Robert?
By presenter, keyword, topic. So it'll be searchable any number of ways, the same way the annual meeting program is, the same way that the online annual meeting program is, and also the app. So it'll have that same functionality as you would for a place-based meeting, but it'll be online for you.
Okay. All right. There was also a question about whether a paper session chair or chair of any session could also monitor the chat in addition to introductions and being timer.
Yeah. I think we need to think through whether there potentially needs to be an additional role, as we're doing right now. I'm glad I'm not monitoring the chat or the Q&A. And we very much, since the 2009 reforms of the annual meeting, one of the biggest complaints that we heard from open membership emails, I guess that's what we were primarily doing then, even though there was websites, and questions that we raised, and how the annual meeting policy and procedures and the research advisory committee as a joint task force. We had open town hall meetings. We crowdsourced information. One of the concerns about the present, well, there were two concerns about paper sessions. One, that papers were connected that had no connection. Too much reading, I guess there were three concerns, and that the chair was virtually a timekeeper. The discussant often gave another paper, and that you should only have a discussant if they were going to be a value added, and that the chairs were not necessarily connected. So we've really encouraged units to identify chairs that have some background, whatever their career stage, and interest in the substance, and they should be able to also, of course, monitor the time of presenters some, but that's not the primary motif. That is a reason, but that they should be also able to open with some questions and facilitate a discussion with the attendees, and maybe even sometimes with the three paper givers, so that it's not so siloed, something that may connect and integrate. I think if we're in virtual space, we need to ask ourselves collectively whether having someone participate in, who can essentially handle the Q&A, at least I'm focused more on the Q&A than the moderation of time, that it might be necessary and useful. And I recently attended in August 2 sessions, and I think George was in the same space and maybe attended more. But I think in at least one, I didn't stay past the presentation of the others because we had a Zoom. But I think there was a person beyond the chair. It actually might have been the one of the unit organizers that was handling the Q&A. I think that can be helpful. It probably will depend on what we view to be the attendance a bit. You know, if it's 30 people in the room, maybe a chair can handle it. But if I had to go now and speak with you, although of course the chair isn't the speaker, and kind of glean it might be a little problematic. So we want to think about that, it could be that when there's a discussant could also raise their issues, and as well as maybe monitor the Q&A. And we'll work through some models and, you know, kind of share them and see what you all think. And obviously then we have to, you know, any point in time, I suppose, you know, we'll have to make our best decision as to how to handle that without overburdening more volunteers to do more things, and we're attentive to that.
Okay, there's a question about how will proposals for off-site meetings be handled, assuming there is a way to conduct those successfully virtually.
We didn't have a call for off-site. I mean, they were in the call when we thought we were going to be in Florida. So there could be in some submissions, those that came in that were off-site in Florida, we've indicated that we're not leaning to any one region or locale. Let's say, though, I don't know what's coming through in the symposia. So let's say there was a session from some collaborators from some different scholars from, let's say, Queens College, TC, and NYU, that were session submissions with 3 teams studying the impact of detracking on Long Island schools, on select Long Island schools that have been working on tracking and detrack. I'm just making this up. I suppose if that event around that research was going to happen in the place of an event like a museum or whatever, or like these 3 schools, and there was the capacity to broadcast from those locations, since we're location-less, I don't see that much different from Robert being in Virginia and I'm in Bethesda. There we are. So I suppose having a participant, Sean's in LA, or a, let's say the research director for the Science Museum in San Francisco, talk about their research program and the impact on how they deliver X. If it were, and that's different from us. One of the things I actually introduced when I came to ARA is to have sessions that planned that are typically off-site that are relevant to the region, so that people don't go from place to place, and they could just as well be virtual, but where the education and education research issues that are salient in a community and that researchers in that community are addressing, those are the ones that we are not likely to have because we are, I'll say, somewhat placeless. But those that are endemic to the presentation in a symposia, I think you will try to be able to inform us whether they are feasible off-site. And I don't see that off-site as being, I mean, if Tony were at home, which he is, I think, or at the focused on the educational program and the research component of the African American Museum, if someone from that museum is speaking or showing, I think that's viable, and we would want to include that. I do know that Sean's, with the presidential theme, has been, and one of his co-chairs is deeply engaged in museum work. And I would be shocked if some of those presidential sessions weren't involving participants who aren't transplants at home from academic settings or research institutes, because we want to embrace scholars and educational programming where it resides. Sean, is that right?
Yeah, spoiler alert, we will be doing some version of a digital museum, which we're really excited about. Toby Jenkins is the program chair, co-chair that Felice just mentioned. She directs the Museum of Education at the University of South Carolina. And Toby's already started thinking about ways to have a really dynamic virtual museum space.
Right. And so that's exactly just prototypical of what can happen with session submissions, or we're thinking about around the theme. But it isn't because we're going to the University of South Carolina and the museum. It is that but it'll be undoubtedly using some of their broadcasting or our broadcasting capacities, as we expect to do and hope to do through our own broadcast capacities at our own convening center, so that you won't be in my living room forever, we hope.
Okay, someone has asked whether there will be the option of pre-recording a paper presentation in order to minimize tech and timing issues with viewing the recording followed by live Q&A.
It's an issue we're thinking about in terms of the plus and minus. All of the papers, wherever they reside, in whether it's in a paper session, a roundtable, or a poster, will be created in this interactive presentation mode, which are done in advance. Whether we will also have pre-recorded paper sessions, we're giving a lot of thought to the pluses and minuses. But anyone with a paper who's not in a paper session, in a poster session or a roundtable, or everyone is with a paper anywhere will be, we're not going to be doing PowerPoints on Zoom. We're going to be doing these interactive presentation sessions in Zoom, which allow for, which, as I said, allow for expansion of print, which allow for changing of color for color contrast, which allow for reading of transcripts versus hearing, and which allow for voice as well as reading, and which PowerPoint don't. And that's a shift we had actually hoped to do place-based, and actually it's much more affordable in virtual reality because the equipment costs, we're staggering place-based, but we knew it was so much more accessible for attendees that we were trying to figure out how to do it in place-based mode. Hopefully by 2022, we'll have it worked out. So it's a really good question. We know that's been some experiments with that with some associations, some not. It's got drawbacks in further, I suppose, life isn't perfect. My mother's 106 and she has an expression about, she has an expression that says, when things aren't perfect, they weren't meant to fit like wallpaper on a wall. Wallpaper's coming back, so maybe this resonates with some of you. So, wallpaper on a wall, you want that perfect seam, you want it perfectly. Well, human interaction, exchange, whether it's intellectual exchange, collegial exchange, things are not always perfect. Sometimes things are a little messy, and sometimes they happen at the annual meeting. Some group doesn't leave, or the projector was supposed to be here and things aren't starting on time. So I suppose, to what extent we want to be Cecil B. DeMille and see this as a production. We're giving a lot of thought to with a lot of things, and whether we have some hybrid around that. In some societies that actually have many non-US presentations, but they're in a coherent presentation mode where you could say, oh, well, you could pre-record those. But I think one of the strengths of the ARA annual meeting is that we're trying to create much more synergism across countries, continents, and hemispheres. So the fact that, having a session that's Singapore, and so we do that pre-recorded, certainly means that it's, kind of colleagues talking to colleagues, and part of our commitment in terms of the international space, and definitely a commitment of the World Education Research Association, is to create new synergisms across sectors. So it's not beyond a possibility, but I think that the strengths and weaknesses, and I suppose, we'll have some serious discussions both in-house and from you as to the pluses and minuses. Hopefully we'll make the best choice this year.
Okay, well, Felice, it's now 4:33.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to ask one or two more questions?
Yeah, we want to stick to our commitment to not hold people longer. We can't quite have a show of hands, and we can't quite have a glass of milk or anything else together. So go ahead with a couple of more, and then we'll let's do two more. We'll have then Sean and Robert, and then I'll say goodbye to everybody for now. You can come back on Friday. But go ahead. Do you see something popping?
Okay. There's a question about how will receptions be developed to allow for organic interaction?
Yeah, we're trying mini ones. So we have one on the first with 180 fellows, and maybe only 90 will choose to be in the social hour or half hour. As part of this coalition on sexual and gender harassment, that will be another experiment that we're doing the 16th and 17th of September. I've done and moderated, and sometimes they need some moderation to stimulate and allow for people to kind of talk and hang out. I suppose if we went into the breakout room, I'm a little bit concerned that that would be isolating, meaning it's one thing to talk with someone, and it's another, and to catch their eye spontaneously. We're hoping that the smaller convenings provide the space for spontaneous meetups. In the receptions, and some of them we know are quite large, I suppose we might try to get a sense of sign up, and if it looks like they're quite large, we might be able to do some shuffling. I mean, clearly that's one of what I mean by shuffling is that if the business meeting is, let's say, a half hour, and the reception's an hour and a half, we might kind of create 3 randomized groups and shuffle people around so that you get a chance to engage with others who we wouldn't maybe be able to do if we're talking about, the combination. I don't know whether G and K will want to have their joint reception this year, but that probably has quite a turnout when they do. So we have to think that through, and it's going to be kind of like, how do I think about it? So you know what's in my head. When we redesigned the peer review process, we were trying to avoid having, trying to elevate having reviewers with a greater amount of expertise for a particular arena of scholarship, and to not have as many reviewers as you have submissions. So that was one of the complaints. It was kind of like willy-nilly, you know. They didn't think necessarily, they didn't mind being declined, but the reviewers were not necessarily so experienced. I don't mean years of experience, but I mean bringing expertise on the area, and that it was, you know, it varied so much by the individual reviewers. So we created these panels. And then the original intent of the two committees, when we recommended it to council, is that the typical reviewer would review. We'd have a panel of maybe 8 or 12, and for a very large division, and that they would review as many as 20 was what we were encouraging. Well, we had to redesign that for units and sections that were much smaller. So what do we do in the same spirit if there's only, you know, 15 submissions to a small SIG, and you multiply that times 3 and you've got 45? Well, then you'd say, well, okay, it's at least 8 each or something like that. So we're going to have to calibrate how we provide the social events relative to what we already know. That's quite a bit about. We know that from your prior catering orders, you know, how many people to expect in a room, and we'll know that from the registration, because we'll know from the registration who's registering, and we can triangulate that by division and SIG. And we might need to modify the registration form to say, you know, which of these informal events are you likely to go to? And we can list the SIGs, and we can list the divisions and the dates, and they can check off. It's not, we're not going to admit them, but that'll give us a touch and feel about and that's going to be true of large sessions versus small sessions, you know, how to construct, which options to use and in which ways. And I know it seems a little weird for someone who, of course, comes from, sees myself as a member of the research community and comes from the research community, but as someone who likes to build our field, those little kind of challenges are really kind of interesting, because form and function is part of how we create excellence in the field, you know, and the scaffolding, you know, if you're having very large team meetings and no one can speak, that's not so hot. So if you've got a major project, you have sort of sub-teams working on things. So it's interesting to me, who works in this space of research infrastructure, to think about, and that's kind of the kinds of things that I know that Robert enjoys too, and we're going to work that through. And there'll be probably different models, and we'll have to use our historical data and maybe even add some information to the registration form, so that we can, just if someone signs up for X breakfast, let's say the fellows breakfast, so we know how many people in the room. Well, some show, some don't, but at least we have a good guess.
Okay, and then the final question is whether ERA can post online illustrative examples of interactive presentations and posters.
Yes, we are. We're going to, we want to post, like, not because we're in any sense privileging divisions over SIGs. I think we got a little bit more submissions, but we're going to post at least 12 or so. And we have this new opportunity for the ones we post might not have the new opportunity that now we can offer. And that is for a Zoom session. So we might go back to the 12 week, and anybody can go back in and reinsert that, but ask these folks whether they, before we post it, they've already published, meaning that they've developed it and they've released it. We want to release them as a unit. I think our date was something like October 30th. But we'll put up prototypes. We were looking at prototypes, of course, from astronomy. Well, that was no help because we didn't understand anything. And so we now have real live prototypes from our own field, and actually some great narration and It's very user-friendly. I've walked through it. It's really, it's fun. And it is a very good way of networking throughout the year. So I really encourage it. We're going to send out another announcement this week to everyone who had a paper in. And we also, you know, there's help guides, and both the developer of this product and Robert and I and the meetings team are eager to help too. All you have to do is email us and we can help you if you get stymied. I doubt that you will. If you could do PowerPoint, you could do this, and it's more fun. So let me call our colleagues back on for some final remarks. Sean?
Sure, great. Thank you, Felice, for providing our members with so much wisdom and so much useful information. It was definitely helpful for me to hear what is on your minds as our team works with Felice and Robert and all of our colleagues there at the AERA office to deliver a high quality, really engaging, and most importantly, an incredibly inclusive 2021 annual meeting. You have given me things to think about through the questions that you've asked that have been posed out loud and those that I've read in the chat. So thank you. And thanks to the 124 of you who still remain on the line. It's been great having you. And as Felice said, we're doing this again on Friday. So if you have more questions and you want to hang out with me and her and your other AERA friends, we'll be back together on Friday. But hey, thank you. We're really excited.
Robert, have we put a wrap?
I just thank you for everyone who joined us today. We will be doing this again on Friday. If you have any questions about the annual meeting, the submissions, getting things out to reviewers, things like that, please reach out to the annual meetings team. More than happy to answer your questions and be supportive. So thank you very much.
Yeah, because once this box closes, please use the annual meeting box, because that's our best way of hearing from you. Nathan in particular works closely with the Cigs, of course, and the divisions, the division VPs. I additionally work closely with as division heads and really value that, because that's great in addition to our council meetings. So we have a lot of segues into input, but the best thoughts are when you have these individual thoughts, just don't hold up. One of the things we say, also, if something is confusing for more than 5 minutes, we probably do it all the time. So don't let it stew around. Just ask us, and if we don't have an answer, then we know it has to be on our to-do list. So thank you, really, from all of our hearts to your homes. Be safe. We hope you are. We hope your families and your friends are. We know it's a difficult time with school resuming, with every other kind of pernicious pandemic, including the systemic racism and xenophobia that seems more than rampant in our society. So our meeting will engage with those kinds of issues and engage with you in making for a better meeting. So thanks for coming.